Well, good morning. We're coming from all of our different homes to your home, I'm assuming, this morning. So we're excited to be here. We're doing a Garmin 101 series, and we've got 326 people online right now, or 326 households, probably more people than that, 327. So I'll turn it over to Sam, and let's enjoy this morning.
Morning, everybody. Kenny, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm good. Just had to do a little test there.
Sounds good.
Good.
Well, I just want to take a quick minute to do a little introduction to everybody on the webinar this morning, and to cover a couple housekeeping items. We'll start with those. First of all, as soon as we're done today with the webinar, Brian and I will go to work editing the video and putting together a follow-up email. So you should see an email within 24 hours that will have a link to the video on YouTube. It will have a link to a Dropbox folder, which will have a PDF version of the webinar. And it will have a log of all the questions and answers from the webinar. So I think last week it took us about a day to get that sent out. So keep an eye out for that. But all this information, you will have a chance to go back through at your own pace. For anyone who wasn't with us last week, at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. If you scroll down, you can see it just says Q&A. If you click that, it opens up a box that allows you to ask questions that all of us see. And there's a lot of questions already. So we do the best we can to answer them all during the webinar. And what we can't answer here, we will follow up with after the webinar. And on the webinar this morning, we have the VP of Cutwater Boats and Ranger Tugs, Jeff Messmer. You just heard from him. We have the General Manager, Andrew Custis. We have Kenny Mars, our Customer Service Manager.
Morning.
We have Tim Bates, our Delivery Captain and Engine Specialist. And Brian Dickout is on here. He is our Marketing Associate and Master of PowerPoint. And my name is Sam Bissett, and I'm the Marketing Director. And we have a little intro video to share with everybody here. Give me just a second to get it up.
This wasn't part of what we talked about, Sam.
Oh, it's not?
He's going off script here. I'm getting nervous.
We don't want to let the intro video go here.
Oh, yeah.
No, do it. I just
absolutely.
don't know what we're doing.
And now, for the next 30 minutes, as the prop turns. Brought to you today by Ranger Tugs and Cutwater Boats. Quality cruising and real community.
Couldn't start without that.
No, for sure.
All right.
I thought you were doing the other one of the docking video we were watching.
No, we left that out for this time.
Yeah.
Okay, Kenny, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to make sure I can share my screen here. Can you guys all see that? Okay, so this is our As the Prop Turns Garmin 101. Just another quick thank you guys for joining us. I know everyone's coming from all over the country and everywhere else, so just thanks again. We have a nice little picture here for your viewing pleasure. This is who's going to be presenting your Garmin 101 video today. So some topics we're going to talk about today. This is really just a 101 intro. So I know we can branch off and go to a lot of different topics, but the biggest thing we're going to kind of cover today is going over some vessel settings. These will be specific to different Ranger and Cutwater models. So we're going to kind of walk through a bunch of different slides on how to get to all of these. And then also we're going to go through on how to, once we've set up some of our settings here, how to set up some different nav charts and radar overlay charts for when you're actually cruising. And then finally, we're going to look at some tides and currents, and then look at how to create some routes here. So, and as Sam said earlier, yes, this information will be available after. I know we had a lot of questions, so we just want to make sure that everyone knows they can access this later on. And we tried to make it as user-friendly, so even if you didn't watch the webinar, you can scroll through this and still see all the steps. This page we actually took right off of Garmin's website. So this will show you just some basic home screen functions of your status bar, the pages, the categories, and the menu bar. And we'll kind of be using a lot of these today, so we just thought it'd be good to throw that on there. So the first thing we're going to get into is configuring the vessel settings. So from your home screen, what you're going to see is this settings tab right at the bottom. And just so you guys know, the close and this little camera icon that's on the screen, that's just because we did a screenshot of all these images, so you won't see that on your actual chart plotter. But the first thing we're going to do is configure a keel offset. So to do that, you're going to go to Settings. You're going to go to My Vessel. You're going to go to Depth and Anchoring. And then we're going to select the keel offset. So right now you can see it's actually set to 0, so there's no offset yet. So what you're going to do is type in the footage you want for your offset. So basically you have your transducer sitting in the boat, but that might not be the lowest part of your boat. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an offset. So that actually is reading your depth from the lowest part of the boat. So once this is set up and we have, we pretty much use 2.5 feet for most of our boats, aside from the 41, but 2.5 feet is a pretty good offset. So that way you're taking in the account the draft of your boat versus where your transducer sits in the boat. So the lowest point of the boat is where we're going to be reading our depth from here on out. So once we have that selected, we're just going to hit done. On all of these, you can verify that once it's set, you'll see that your keel offset has been set up in the upper right corner here. The next one we're going to do is our fuel capacity. Now, all of our boats have different fuel tanks, so it's important to make sure that your Garmin is reading correctly and has the correct tank size that it's basing the fuel off of. So same thing on this. We're going to go into settings. We're going to go to My Vessel. We're going to go to fuel capacity. And then from there, you're just going to type in the fuel tank size you have for your boat. And once that's typed in, you're just going to hit done. And we did put a chart here for everyone. So, based on the Cutwater or Ranger you have, you can see what fuel tank size you have on your specific boat. The next one we're going to do is a low fuel alarm. So same thing, we're going to go into settings. We're going to go to alarms. We're going to go to fuel. And then we're going to go to total fuel on board. So right now you can see that is turned off. So by turning it on and selecting the gallons here, we're telling the Garmin that once you get down to 20 gallons of fuel remaining, to sound an alarm or have an alarm pop up on the chart plotter. Everyone has different tank sizes and everyone's going to feel comfortable as far as how low they're going to let the fuel get. This is just a backup reminder that you can put in. Now, I usually do 20 gallons. If you feel more comfortable having an alarm sound sooner, you can change the gallons of when that alarm will actually sound. So now you can see we have 20 gallons in there. We're going to hit done. And then again, we can verify that our low fuel alarm is now on and it's set to 20 gallons. There, on this one too, I think Sam was going to post a link to another quick DIY video Andrew and I did that talks much more in depth on fuel versus reading it off of the engine and reading it from the Garmin screen. So this is just basically setting up to make sure that these alarms are in place and that the Garmin's reading the correct fuel tank size. The next one we're going to do is a shallow water alarm. So again, going into settings, we're going to go to alarms. We're going to select sonar, and then we're going to go to shallow water. So we're going to turn this alarm on, and then we're going to set the depth at which we want the alarm to sound if we get into too shallow of water. So for the Pacific Northwest where we cruise, we're typically in a couple hundred feet of water. So, if we get up into 12 feet, we're really kind of starting to pay attention to what's going on. I know other areas of the country you cruise in typically water this deep, so you wouldn't have your alarm set this shallow. But for us, I think 12 feet is a good depth to have an alarm sound. The other thing to note too is once this alarm is set, it'll also take into account that keel offset we've already set up for the boat. So when you are reading, for example, if you get down to 12 feet, that is from the lowest point of your boat now. Once we have that, we're going to hit done, and you can see our shallow water alarm is now set at 12 feet. Next one we're going to do is our system units. So depending on where and how you cruise, you'll want to read miles per hour versus kilometers per hour versus nautical miles per hour. So to change this around to your liking, you can go to settings. We're going to go to preferences. We're going to go to units. And then you're going to select the system units, and then you can change whichever you'd like here as far as if you want to read in nautical miles versus miles per hour versus kilometers. So you can select any one of these. And then we're also going to go into a little bit of routing towards the end of this, but one thing to note is we want to know how our auto guidance parameters are set up. We want to know how it's making the route on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and check to see how those parameters are set up. So again, we're going to go into settings. We're going to go to preferences, navigation, auto guidance. And then we have 3 parameters we're going to be setting up. The first one we're going to do is our preferred depth. So right now you can see it's set at 3 feet. So right now, if we were to create a route, it would allow, or the route would be okay going into 3 feet of water. So what we're going to do is we're going to select that, and we're going to change the depth. So we basically drug the screen down, or drug the little cursor down to 18 feet. And once we did that, now you can see our preferred depth is at 18 feet. So when we are making a route with the auto guidance, it'll always keep us in at least 18 feet of water. So now we're going to go through our vertical clearance. We're going to set that one for 18 feet as well. And then you can see it set up. And then the last one we're going to do is our shoreline distance. So also on the vertical clearance, that'd be your overhead clearance. So if you have any low bridges that you're worried about, with the auto guidance making a route, this is what it's taking into account, any low hanging bridges. And then the last one is our shoreline distance. So we're going to go down to farthest here. And then we have all 3 of our parameters set. So if at any time you are creating a route and it doesn't allow you to create it, it's because one of these 3 parameters it cannot meet, which I think is our next slide anyways. So there's a number of things you can do to still create routes. You just necessarily can't go all the way into, say, maybe Gig Harbor where Gig Harbor has a very narrow entrance and it's shallow. And the reason we don't want you routing all the way in there is we don't want the autopilot driving the boat. We want you manually driving through those narrow, shallow areas. So that's the reason we set these the way we do. You know, if you were to get into shallower water, or, you know, the shoreline is closer, we want you to be driving manually, not having the autopilot do the driving. So that's our first segment. Those are just some basic settings as far as the Garmin goes. Are there do we have any questions that we need to answer at this time? Are any of my guys going to come?
We have one that is what is the normal distance in feet from shore versus farthest? And then John, this might go in. John Knowlton wants to know, what does farthest refer to?
So the farthest would be the farthest. So if we're making a route, nearest would be the closest into shore. Now it also takes in the depth, right? So if your depth is let's say shallower than 18 feet, it still won't hug you right up against that shoreline. So it's taking everything into calculation as it's making the route. So let's say you have really deep water close up to the shoreline. If you had it set to that nearest, it would route you as close as it could to that shoreline, keeping you at least in 18 feet of water. So it's taking all three parameters into account. The farthest would still, even if you had deep water close into shore and you didn't want to be that close, it would still route you out. And it's like a couple 100 yards difference between each one. We can look up the exact distances for all three. I just like to do mine on the farthest because I know at least if I'm making a route and it prompts me, I can look and see where any of those issues would be. So it's taking all three into account while the route's being created.
And this is a good one, which I know I think we covered, but Dave, if preferred routing depth is 18 feet and you're at a dock with 5 feet, can you not set the route until away from the dock? And that is correct. Well, I think it depends on destination of where you're going to be traveling and what your parameters. So can you just talk about a little bit more on adjusting, you know, your auto guidance parameters? So when people are going into shallow waters, you know, or deep waters or narrow entrances, you know, what that would do and why you might change that.
Yeah. So if you are in a marina that is shallow and obviously you're close to shore, it's sometimes it will prompt you that it can't create the route. So a lot of times if you just even idle outside the marina, where you're in a deep enough area, and this is without changing any settings. So if we leave all of our settings the same, you can go just outside the marina and pick a location or pick a marina, and then auto route to it, or have the auto guidance make a route there. If you're in typically shallower areas, then you could adjust those parameters so you're not constantly running into that. But you know, when we do the routes towards the end of this slide, hopefully that'll kind of clear up too. If you had to, instead of going all the way into a marina, you know, picking a destination just outside that marina and auto routing to it, and then driving the rest of the way in.
And then you have one more just about settings on nautical versus metric. He said he didn't see miles per hour only.
Oh yeah, that's the statute that would have miles per hour in it.
Looking through some of these from Al, do you have to put the autopilot in standby to turn off the auto guidance?
Do you have to put the autopilot in standby? No.
Yeah, so you can create your auto guidance if you create a new route on auto guidance, it will put you into automatically into a heading hold, right? Until you tell it you would like to re-engage on the route.
Yeah, and we have all those slides coming up here at the end.
Okay, perfect. I see another one from Ross about tide direction arrows. We'll get into that.
Yep.
There's a couple just regarding fuel, and I think when we get in maybe into some of your settings on your data bars, that we'll talk about the fuel tank float and the difference, and maybe point them in the direction of our video that we've done.
Right. Yeah, we'll hit all those.
There's another one, Canadian. Can we use Canadian imperial gallons in the settings for fuel? We'll talk about that. Is auto guidance the same as autopilot?
No.
And
I mean, the
yeah.
the auto guidance is auto calculating the route versus you manually picking a destination and creating all the turns or waypoints coming back. So the auto guidance, now if you have an older chart plotter, you'll need one of the G2 or G3 chips to unlock the auto guidance feature. With the newer 8600 series, it comes with them. But if you want to create your own route, you certainly don't have to use auto guidance all the time. To me, it's just the quickest and easiest. And I'll get into here in a little bit how to, even with an auto guidance route, how you can still change some of those waypoints along the way.
Okay. Does vertical clearance take in consideration the tides? Which I honestly don't know that, just because most of our boats are power boats that don't have, or, you know, I don't know of any, you know, maybe there's a few very, very small amount of bridges or things that you might go under where this would matter. But in our area anyways, I'm not sure about East Coast or any of that.
Yeah, I know, like on the chart, when you're looking at it, you're always looking at the mean low tide on the chart. So when it's looking at the route, the biggest thing is if you're at all worried about that, I would have the autopilot off and just be driving real slow up to that bridge. If you're worried, I mean, we have a pretty big tidal swing up here, but we also don't get into many low bridges up here as well. And usually I found too, like I know down in Tacoma, they have on one of the bridges, they'll tell you, you know, what the footage is to the water line. And usually you see like a little scale there if the tide's going up and down. So you can kind of verify as you get there what it's at.
I'm just getting through a couple of these. Okay, I think we can answer the rest of these on, we can do answers directly, but we will say we're getting a lot of fuel questions, and so I don't think we're getting into fuel on this presentation. But.
No, we're just kind of setting up to make sure that the Garmin knows the fuel tank size and where to read it on the chart. The video you and I did a couple years ago is much more in depth on reading fuel and the differences between reading it on your engine display versus reading it on your chart plotter. So yeah, this is just basic settings at this point right now, not to dive too deep into every little one.
All right.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, see you in a second.
No, is that like turn my video off? Is that what that means?
I just figured you're going to turn it off, so I was just saying bye.
Okay.
You can leave it on. Actually, no, turn it off. Okay, so the next one we're going to get into is setting up the favorites tab. So on the newer 8600 and 7200 or 7600 series, you'll have this favorites tab. If you have an older chart plotter, you wouldn't have a favorites tab, but under the combinations on yours, you can customize all of those charts. So when you go into your chart plotter, the favorites tab is going to be at the top. And if you've never added favorites before, this is what it's going to look like. So on your side data bar here, there's a number of different charts and sonar and radar pages, combos you can use, the smart mode. So what I like to do is, you know, on any of the boats I'm on, I like to just set up one page with all the stuff I'm going to use. That way I'm not bouncing around through here while I'm out trying to find, you know, a radar overlay or go back to my nav chart. I can just put it all on one screen. So to add and build a favorites tab, what you're going to do is just the ones we're going to do first are your charts. So we're going to go down to your charts, and then you're going to press and hold on the chart that you want to move to the favorites tab. And when you do that, this bar will come up and you can just hit OK. So it's just letting you know it's been added to the favorites. The next one we're going to add is a radar overlay page. These are the two I like to use a lot while I'm cruising. And then if we come down to the one helm and the AV gauges, the one we're going to add here is fuel. Again, you press and hold, and then that'll save it to the favorites. And then the next one we're going to do is the vessel tab. So tying into a little bit of what Andrew talked about on the last webinar about power management, what I like to set up on the vessel tab, because you have basically 4 data points, just 4 big data points. If you press and hold on those, you can do your unit voltage and you can do your engine voltage, which I know he talked a little bit about reading off of the Garmin. So that's why, as a quick kind of cheat sheet, I like to have that on my favorites tab, so at a glance I can kind of see what my voltages are. So once we've added these, this is what your favorites tab is going to look like. I also added the fishing one in here as well. I like to use that. I know it's labeled fishing, but I like to use that a lot when I'm setting the anchor, because it'll give you a split screen of a fishing chart, and then the other side will be a sonar page. So I use that one a lot. Any of these charts that are in the favorites, what I like to do is customize all of the gauges. So regardless of what chart I'm in, all of my data points off to the side are in the exact same order. I don't want to be bouncing around from screen to screen and have my engine temp at the top, and then it's in the middle on the next page, and it might be at the bottom on the next. I want to make sure everything's in the exact same order. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the data bar. Now you can do that. You're going to do this on each individual chart. We're just going to show you how to do it on one for today. So this is the data bar. And if you haven't done this before, this is the basic info that Garmin gives you basically out of the box when the chart plotter gets hooked up. We also tie in the engine to our plotters, so you can get engine data right from your chart plotter. So what we're going to do is basically starting from the top and working our way down, we're going to set up these data points. And we did put a little note in here that if you're doing any engine data, you just have to make sure the ignition is turned on before you can add those in. So what we're going to do is on the very top, you're just going to press and hold. And this one, we're going to do our coolant temp. So we're going to, once we do this, we press and hold, we go to engine. We're going to go to coolant temp, and we're going to select it. So now our temperature is at the top. The next one I like to see is my oil pressure. And the reason I like this is because I get a nice digital readout of what my oil pressure is. So again, we're going to press and hold. We're going to go to engine. We're going to go to oil pressure. And then now we have a nice digital readout for our oil pressure. Coming down the list, we have our total fuel economy. Press and hold. We're going to go to fuel, and then total fuel economy. So I know you can do different ones here. I know some people like gallons per hour. You could change that if you wanted to. I just like to read basically my miles per gallon when I'm cruising. The next one, press and hold, we're going to go to fuel again. And this one, we're going to set our total fuel remaining. So if you watch the video that Andrew and I did, we talk a lot about reading fuel on the Garmin, but then also reading fuel from your engine display. So the important thing here is on the Garmin, this remaining, you need to reset every time you fill up with fuel. So that DIY we did, we'll talk about adding fuel to the boat. But what we added or set earlier in our vessel settings was we set up the fuel tank so the Garmin knows what a full tank of fuel is. So that's why it's important to know what those vessel settings are, so you get good data out of your chart plotter. So next one down, we're going to do our speed. So we're gonna press and hold, go to GPS, and then we're gonna select GPS speed. And then lastly, what we're gonna do is our depth. So when I'm cruising, how I like to set up my boat is I put my engine temp at the top because I don't want my temperature to get too high. I like my water depth at the bottom because I don't want my depth to get too low. Don't overheat, don't run aground, should have a fun day boating. So to do this one, press and hold again, and we're gonna scroll down to water, and then we're gonna select depth. Now, one thing to note, and I know we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is all of these depth markings are in feet, and they're showing the mean low tide. So the average 0 foot tide is what the chart's showing us here. When you look at the screen, all the white is going to be the deep water. The baby blue, we start to get into shallow water. And then the green is all exposed land at low tide. So even at a glance, as you're coming in and out of the marina, you'll kind of see what depths you're getting into. But once we have the depth selected, you'll see it's at the bottom right here. And that is going to read real time what's underneath the boat, regardless of what the tidal swing is as you're cruising. So that would be how, this is my preference. I know Tim and Andrew have their own preference on how they set these things up, but this is kind of just how I like to have my screens when I'm out cruising. So you'd want to just, like I said, do this on the other two charts or whatever other charts you add to that favorites tab, and that way when you go screen to screen, everything here is in the exact same order. One other feature that I like to activate or turn on is my tides and currents. I like to turn those to animated, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. But to turn them on, you're going to go to Menu. We're going to go to Layers. We're going to go to Chart. And then the tides and currents are turned on. We're just going to hit that arrow here. And then we're going to turn the animated from off to on. And then there's that slider that I know Tim's a fan of. So we're going to leave that off for now. So once we have the animated turned on, what we're going to see is these arrows on the chart now. And this is going to go yellow, orange to red, the faster the water is moving. But this is showing us the direction. And then, just at a glance to kind of give you an idea of how fast the water is moving. So on any one of the arrows, you can always tap on the screen like we did here. And you can see, obviously, the direction the water is moving, but then too, how fast it's moving right now. So we took this shot of the Tacoma Narrows, and you can see it's upside down. This would be the south, this would be north. So it's an ebb tide. Water's going out. And we can see just how fast it's moving at this time. But when you're cruising, you would always have these arrows as a reference for when you're out. So that's one other feature I like to have on, especially where we are here. So that one was a little bit of a quicker one, but do we have any other questions from that one, Andrew?
Takes me a little bit to figure out.
we're better with the Garmin's than we are with the PowerPoint and Zoom. I can tell you that.
So I guess one coming in, I just saw, I think it disappeared, was can you save these settings? So the settings that you actually put in, for parameters and, the data bars and all that stuff, do they automatically save?
Yes, they do. Yeah. So once you have any of these settings we've done or any of the data bars set up, they're going to be there. So unless Andrew gets on your boat or Tim gets on your boat and changes them to their liking, they're going to stay the same.
Yeah. I'll leave the arguments for later when we're off camera.
There you go.
One coming in from Ronnie, how do I know what is the optimal temp and pressure? So that would be like, engine coolant temps and pressure, which I think you can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to vary if you have an outboard versus a diesel inboard. You know, your diesel Volvo Pentas are going to be around, you know, 185. The outboards are going to be around the 140 mark. Your oil pressure is going to fluctuate based on, you know, how fast you're going. So, you know, the more RPMs you have, the higher oil pressure you're going to have. My biggest thing is if I'm up and cruising, you know, say typically on an outboard, your oil pressure is going to be in that 60 to 70 PSI range. I don't want to see low oil pressure if I'm up at that speed. So I don't want to see it down in say the teens. That's why I like to see a nice digital readout. So the oil pressure does vary quite a bit based off the RPM and speed. But I think the biggest thing is to just make sure that you're kind of monitoring and seeing what your boat, how it reacts as you're out cruising, and just kind of keeping a baseline. And that'll help you long term of if there's an issue, you can kind of, you know, keep an eye on that from other outings. But yeah, the temp, same thing. You'll once you're up to temp, usually you stay with the outboards around that 140, and then the diesels you're about 180, 185 on the Volvo Penta.
And we're just a quick one. It's a little off topic, but we have a lot. Do our transducers monitor water speed or temperature?
Yeah, so ours do not. They are a shoot through, so they shoot through the hull. They're not physically mounted in the water. So there's no paddle wheel, and yeah, you wouldn't have any kind of water temp sensor, just for the fact of the transducer itself is not sitting in the water. It's shooting through the hull.
Okay, let me look. This one I really like, Kenny, from Bob Miles. He would rather see mine or Tim's display. He doesn't like yours.
Shocker.
Yeah. Team Bob.
I'll remember that, Bob.
That's not exactly what he wrote. I might have added in a few things, but
Oh, you're throwing him under the bus. Okay.
so, all right. I think
Well,
we can answer the rest of these
Okay.
with chat. So
Cool.
off I go. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so now that we've turned on the tides and currents to be animated, we're going to show you how to actually, you know, check the entire day, kind of check to see what the tidal swing is going to be and what the currents are going to be running. So on the page, we're just going to kind of go through the basics of how to check, where to check, and then also as far as if you want to check somewhere not based on your GPS location. So as we're doing these, everything's going to be based off of your GPS location. So in order to check your tides and currents, on the bottom bar, you're going to have that info tab. We're going to select it. We're going to go to tides and currents. We're going to go to tides. And if you haven't checked before, it's going to say invalid station. So all you need to do, and what you're going to do regardless if you're moving around and want to check where you're at, you're just going to hit nearby stations. So we were sitting in Des Moines, so closest tidal station is right there in Des Moines. As you go down the list, you'll see these distances get greater and greater. So they get further away from where you're at. So this, right now, what we're doing is we're just checking of the tides where the boat's sitting. So once we select Des Moines, you'll see the time when we checked it, and then you'll also see the footage. So basically at 9 a.m., we were at a plus 4.9 foot tide. On your screens, you won't see this little red dot. What that is you can drag this cursor around so you can check the tides at, say, a later time. So all we did is we had that there because we drug it out so you could see at, say, 1:37, we'll be at a plus 7.1 foot tide. So, you know, for us, if we're doing any crabbing or shrimping and we're dropping pots, it's nice just to kind of see, okay, what's the tidal swing? And you can check kind of throughout the day. You can also come down to the bottom and hit next day. So if you wanted to see in Des Moines what the tide's going to be tomorrow, just hit the next day, and then you'll have that slide come up. At the very bottom, on any one of these, when you're checking the tides, you always have the 2 high tides for the day and the 2 low tides. with that, you get the time of each and then the footage. So for example, like our low tide here at 10:47 a.m., even though we're at a low tide, we're still plus 3.2 feet. So, you know, we're not all the way down to that 0 foot tide. Even on low tide, you're not going all the way to 0 each time. So that's where you can kind of see what the swing is throughout the day. And then we're going to hit back here, and then we're going to go back to tides and currents. And then now we're just going to look at our currents. So again, we're going to hit nearby stations. You'll see there's different current stations and different tidal stations. So the closest one when we were sitting in Des Moines was Browns Point. So we're going to select that. And then this is what the first page is going to show you for the currents. What I like to do is if you hit that show report button or tab, it breaks it down much easier in my opinion. So now we have our max flood times, and then we have the speed over here. So right now these are set, the speeds are not. So right now you can see our flood, our ebb. So this is our water coming in. This is our water going out. That's why you see a little negative right here. And then our slack water times. Now you can see right here, none of this is anything crazy. But what we're going to show you here is, say if we went to Deception Pass and we wanted to check even while we're still sitting in Des Moines. But this is just how you're checking right where you're at. Again, just showing the maxes for each and then your slack water times here. And then we'll hit the home button. So now here's a shot of the 41 going through Deception Pass. So, you know, let's say we're still in Des Moines and we want to check and see for today what the currents are going to be, for example, in Deception. So what you're going to do is on the chart itself, you're just going to zoom out and then drag the screen up to where you want to check. So because we're checking in Deception Pass here, we're going to now zoom in. And then once you're zoomed in, you just have to tap the screen and then you get these the crosshairs here. The important thing is we're not going to do info down at the bottom like we did before. You actually, once you tap the screen, you have this top data bar that comes up. So we're going to select info at the top. And then we're going to go to our currents. So now, instead of looking at our GPS location in Des Moines, which is where we just checked the other two tides and currents, we're now looking from this location where we just tapped on the screen. So the closest current station to this point is Deception Pass, and that's what we're looking at right now. So next is, once we have Deception Pass selected, we have our first current graph, and then we're going to hit show report. So this will give you a little bit better idea of our slack water times, our max ebb times, and then our flood tide right here. So basically you have your slack water is 0, so it's not, your water's not moving. But then if you look at 6 a.m., you know, your water is going out at 7.5 knots. So everyone's comfort level is different as far as going through at that time and speed. So, you know, if you're worried at all about it, I'd say, you know, try to time it to, you know, a little bit closer to one of these slack water times. You can see the difference. You know, you're going from 9:31 to you know, 12. The water's not going to switch over and just start running at you know, almost 6 knots. It's going to take a while. It takes a while to, you know, kind of slow down. It takes a while to build back up. So, you know, for example, here at Deception, you have a little bit of grace on either side of slack. You don't have to hit it right at 9:31. And, you know, I found here especially that it can get a little congested with people trying to hit it right at 9:31 all the time, or, you know, whenever your slack water time is. But, you know, say you missed the 9:31, now we can look and say, okay, our next time to hit slack would be at 3:22. So that would be our next window of what time we would want to hit it. So that would be checking at a you know, further out location for your tides and currents if you didn't want to look, say, right at the marina you're sitting in. Any questions? No? Okay, sounds good. Moving on.
Here's one from from George. You got me there. Are tides adjusted for daylight savings time?
It's a good question.
It's a good question, George.
That is a good question.
And I had it typed out. And do you know what the answer is, Kenny?
I don't know if they are.
Yeah, I would imagine that if the time displayed on your Garmin when you go and set up in the data bar,
Yeah.
time is current to what it is, then your tides and currents would be correct. And Bob asked kind of the same thing. Do the tides and currents match up with, you know, ports and passes, for instance, that's, you know, published for our area?
Right.
And I always check both. You know,
yeah.
I look at Garmin tides and currents, and I look at the ports and passes, and usually I've always found they're very close.
Yeah, so that is true. I mean, we've always cross-referenced them, and they've always been on. So I guess we've never really run into any issues of being an hour off on the book versus what the Garmin's telling us. So.
All right, I think we're good. We were typing away, so I think
Okay.
We're good to keep going.
All right. So see you in a sec.
Hey, we'll see you later, Kenny.
All right. Bye-bye. So the next one we're going to do is, you know, a route creation. So basically, you know, let's say we're leaving Des Moines and we wanted to go up to Deception Pass where we just looked at the currents. So keeping the cursor on the same location where we were checking the currents earlier, what you can do is with this top data bar, you have auto guidance displayed here. You also have go to and route to. So go to, I would say you're seldom going to use because that always does a straight line. The route to, you can kind of see the zigzags here, but that allows you to basically pick your end destination, and then you would manually put in each waypoint all the way back to the boat with a route you would basically customize. So what we're going to do is, because we already have our auto guidance parameters set, we're going to use auto guidance. So we're going to select that. And you can see once it's selected, this pink line is our route coming all the way up to Deception Pass. So, you know, we already have our parameters set, but, you know, even if you wanted to change the route, you can do that with the adjust path. So by hitting adjust path, what that's going to do is you'll see that the route now has a dotted line kind of in the pink there. So once you hit adjust path, the entire route now has that dotted line. And what we did is we zoomed in kind of right, you know, right on the corner here, right on the edge where it's like, okay, maybe I don't want to be that close. So in order to move my route away from the shore, I just need to tap right on the route, and then I get the arrows that pop up. So if I take and drag, I can drag the route away from that shoreline. So with this, you can do it as many times as you want to kind of manipulate and change the route along the way. It'll keep your same end destination, and it'll keep your same starting point of where the boat is. So once you've done all your adjustments, all you're going to do is hit done. And then we have our new route built here. And you can see off to the side, you know, this is the full route. And the red square is basically the zoomed in area that we're looking at. So you could do this for the whole thing. And once we've looked and gone over the route, you can then hit start navigating. And then once you're out of the marina, you don't want to engage the autopilot in the marina. Once you're out of the marina, you can hit the engage button on the autopilot, and you can actually have the autopilot follow the route. If you don't have an autopilot, you can still create routes. You can still see this second data bar that pops up with your distance to destination, you know, your arrival time, you're just going to manually steer. You're not going to have the autopilot doing anything. So this is us cruising. You can see we're on the route. You can see our distance, our arrival time, our speed, which this one we were on a 27 cruising for this little segment, but this would be cruising right on the route. Hey there, Andrew.
Are you not to I just had a question. Are you able just to go back a couple slides to show how to adjust the route really quick again?
Yeah.
All right. I see a few questions. I'll leave you alone for now.
Oh, I don't care. It's fine. So yeah, so basically you just want me to go through the start?
Just where they asked about adjusting the autopilot or the auto guidance route.
Okay.
You know how you selected the route?
Yep. So we have our route built right here. We're in Des Moines. We're going to Deception. When you hit auto guidance, this sidebar pops up. So all you're going to do is hit adjust path. And once you hit adjust path, we zoomed in just to see the route much closer, but then you'll see the route has the dotted lines. And what you're going to do is just tap the screen right on the route, anywhere on that pink line, and that's where the arrows pop up. So this is allowing you to move the route. So when you do that, you're just, all I did was I touched the arrows, I drug them away from the shoreline. So you can see now, again, keeping the same starting point, the same end destination, we just drug that waypoint out further away from the shoreline. So hopefully that helps. And then once we have all of our adjustments made, we just hit done. So we got that, engaging, we're cruising. So that is how we would create a route without, say, searching for a specific marina or, you know, state park. So Gig Harbor is one we use a lot as a reference because it has a really narrow entrance to the harbor. If you were going or cruising to Gig Harbor, you would do the same thing we just did to Deception Pass. You know, you would tap the screen, select auto guidance, and adjust your route as needed, and then start the route. If you wanted to search specifically for a marina, you can do that under the search by name. So to do that, and this is a picture of Elliott Bay Marina right here. So to do that, on the bottom, now you'll always have this bottom bar available. So from the bottom bar, you're going to go to Info. We're going to go to Services. And then we're going to do Search by Name. Now, what you're going to do is just type in the marina. You don't have to type the entire thing out. For this, you could just say Elliott. And then once you have it typed, you're going to hit Done. And we have Elliott Bay Marina selected. You'll see it has the address, a phone number for them. Not all marinas are going to monitor a VHF channel. If they do, it's nice because they'll list it here. So as you're coming into the marina, you can at least hail them on the VHF if you're coming in for moorage or something. So it's always nice. I always like to take a peek here and see if they are monitoring the VHF channel. It'll also give you a bunch of other data about the marina too. The biggest one is, do they have gas? Do they have diesel? Or do they just have one or the other? So on any one of these, as you're searching for marinas, usually whatever data they have, it'll pop all of that up as you do the search. So now we want to create our route. So we're going to go to Start Nav, and we're going to go to Auto Guidance again, just because I'm a fan of that. So we have from Des Moines going to Elliott Bay. You can see our route. You can see our pink line. We have all of our animated tides and currents turned on here, so we can see we'll be going with it. And if we wanted to do any adjustments, you can see this is where we would hit that adjust path, and then our route would go to a dotted line. So then we can make any adjustments we needed to. So to me, it all looks good there for what we were doing, and we're going to hit Start Nav. Now, once you create a route, you will always have the second data bar pop up. That's why on the first page when we were setting up, you know, our charts, I didn't put any distance to destination or arrival times, because once I have a route built, that pops up anyways. So I just like to do it that way. It makes it a little bit cleaner over here while you're cruising. So underway, we have our route created. The one question we get a lot of is, how do we get back on the route if we have to come off of it for whatever reason? You know, if you have to go around another boat, if there's debris in the water, how do I get back, or how do I recalculate? So if you want to just recalculate, we'll go through those steps, but to recalculate, you're just basically saying that, you know, I'm going 13 some miles north. If I'm a couple hundred yards off the route, does it really matter? Do I have to drive the boat all the way back to the route? So you can come in here, and what we're going to do is hit menu. We're going to go to nav options, and then we're going to recreate or recalculate auto guidance. So what that does is everything we've saved, any adjustments we've saved or have tweaked, and then our end destination is going to stay the same. We're just going to move that pink line over to start the route where the boat is now versus, you know, like a couple hundred yards to the right or to the starboard. So once we recalculate, it's going to ask us again just to verify all of or any potential hazards that might be on the route. And then you can see that pink line is now moved over. The next one is on the autopilot itself. So this one could be a segment in its own, but just a quick little run through. If you're looking at the autopilot display and you have a route built, you will see this follow route if you're engaged on the route. And you also, the biggest and easiest way for me to tell if you're following the route or not is you'll have the pink line here that's showing you on the route. So if you had to come off and adjust for any debris in the water, vessels that you had to drive around, you can just hit standby, and that would give you the helm or give you the wheel. To re-engage, we would just hit menu, and then the top one would say engage route. If you haven't cruised or engaged on the route yet, you might have to come down to the GPS steering, and you'll see the engage route there. But once you've been cruising on the route and you come off of it, that first tab is going to be the engage route. So if you just were to hit engage at the bottom of the autopilot display, it's always going to put you in a heading hold. The engage at the bottom here is not going to put you engaged back on the route. You have to specifically tell the autopilot you want to engage back on the route versus a heading hold. So this is where if you wanted to just engage on a heading hold, you would hit the button here, and then you'd see the engage button kind of corresponds with it. When you're engaged on a heading hold, you always will see the degrees here versus engaged on a route, you'll see the pink line that you're engaged on. So you could still have a route built, and you don't necessarily have to have the autopilot engaged right on that route. You could still have it engaged and just kind of follow closely if you wanted to. So I'm sure there'll be a few questions on that, but it's I think the biggest thing is just to watch and see, okay, am I engaged on a heading hold with the degrees, or am I engaged on the route, and am I following the pink line here? So now that we've cruised, we have our tracks here. And as you come in and out of the marina, especially your main moorage or home marina, you'll know this starts to get pretty cluttered. So what we like to do is come in here and clear those out, especially after you've been coming in and out of the marina a few times. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is if you hit the info button at the very bottom, we're going to go to user data. We're going to go to tracks, and then we're going to clear your active tracks. And you can see right now we have about 16% that's active right now. So once we hit clear, it's just going to make sure you're okay to delete them all. And then we'll hit OK. And you'll see, yeah, we have no tracks listed. And then all the tracks are gone here. So we didn't disable the tracks. The tracks are still going to be there. So the next time we leave to go cruising, you'll still be creating tracks. We didn't turn them off. We just got rid of all the old ones from the previous time or times we've been out cruising. So I know that that's one we get hit on a lot on how do you get rid of all of those. So it's pretty easy going in there and getting rid of all that old stuff there. Now we'll wait for Andrew.
You got me this time.
Oh man.
I know.
What's up?
I've got a couple questions here. First one from Janelle asking about how important it is to hit slack tide going through deception, saying that they have no problems going through, even with some current going through there.
I'm not answering that. No, I think it all depends on the boat and your comfort level. I mean, everyone's comfort level is different as far as I think the boats are fine handling it, but again, it's pleasure boating. You want to have fun with it. I don't want to go out there and scare my wife and kids and have them not want to boat with me. So I think the best thing to do is as you go through deception, check, see how fast it's moving, and then you can kind of get a baseline of what you're comfortable with. 1 or 2 knots, 3 knots, no problem. When you get to the 4 and 5, maybe it's not as comfortable for you to go through, and you'll know what the crew is comfortable with. But I think deception isn't as crucial, but as you get further north, like going up into Canada and some of those areas, I think it definitely matters hitting some of them at slack tide. Usually if they have rapids in the name, like Eucultus Rapids, man, there's a reason. They're not saying that to be playful. There's rapids there.
Okay, next question from John Knowlton here asking about on Autopilot, will it sense anything in front of the boat like a kayak, anything like that?
Not yet. Maybe in a few years Garmin will have that technology, but no, that's why even on Autopilot, you still want to be at the helm. You still want to be monitoring everything around you. The Autopilot is just steering too. So it's not going to do anything for your throttle. So if you have to come off the route for any debris or boats or kayaks, paddle boarders, you're going to have to tell the Autopilot to go to standby. You can take the wheel, but I think for me it's easier. We always prefer just to hit the standby button, and then you instantly have full control versus enabling that shadow drive function.
Okay, next question from David is about the second data bar, the automatic navigation data bar. Can those settings or those displays be changed, or are those predetermined?
Which one now? The second?
It's the second overlay for when you're in a route.
Yeah, you can go in and tweak them. I know for whatever reason on the smaller displays, they seem to have a lot more data on them. The two I've always cared about were my arrival time and my distance to destination. So those ones have always been there. I've never really tried to go in and tweak them any further than that. But I know for whatever reason, like on the 23, they usually have like 8 data points versus just the 4 there. So yeah, I know you can go in there and tweak them. I've never really wanted to play with it, because the two I cared the most about was knowing what time I'm going to get there, and then how far away I am.
Okay. Next question from Doug here is about going underneath bridges when in Autopilot. Recommend leaving it in pilot or taking it out of pilot.
I would definitely say to take it out of pilot and just drive manually. I think that'd be the safer thing.
Perfect. I think the rest of these we can keep answering here on the questions.
Cool. Thanks for joining. That's it. We're done. You can come back, Tim.
I'm back.
All right. That was Garmin 101. What?
We can take a few of these, just a few of the questions live, but
Sure.
Just this one, Kenny, when I hit engage after canceling to avoid like a collision, the Garmin will make a sharp turn. I believe you did go through that, how to go back on the route earlier on, but maybe you could just touch on that again.
Yeah, so that's the other reason. So like if you come off of your route to like again get away from any debris or boats, that's where I like to recalculate for where the boat's sitting at now. If you re-engage the autopilot on the route, yeah, it makes that turn because it's trying to jump you right back on the route. So the easier thing or what we've usually done is just recalculate to where you're sitting at, and then you won't have that sharp turn that steers you back to where the route was, especially when you're going, like I said, 13 so miles up to Sound. It a couple hundred yards in that area doesn't make too much of a difference.
And then the one that I keep seeing come up that we've answered, but it's how to save an auto guidance route to use later on.
Yeah, we didn't get into saving routes at all or saving waypoints on this segment or even the ones you've built. I'll definitely save waypoints. The routes I typically don't save because of how quick the auto guidance creates the route. But yeah, maybe on the next one we can go into how to save waypoints, how to save routes, how to save tracks, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can definitely do it.
Okay, and then just for everybody, did you get into the shadow drive on the autopilot at all, or no?
No, not really. I just got into coming on and off the route, not really taking the wheel versus just hitting the standby.
Yeah, so if you have just a minute to explain the shadow drive to people and how that works or is supposed to work on Garmin.
Yeah, so if basically the shadow drive is a sensor that you have in the hydraulic steering line, and if you are cruising on, with the autopilot engaged, and you have to change course quickly, before you hit standby or do anything with your route, you can take the wheel and make what Garmin calls a definitive turn. And when you make that quick turn, you'll see on your autopilot display, it'll flash shadow drive. So by doing that quick turn, it's disabling the autopilot automatically. So in an emergency, if you just happen to see a log right in front of you and you have the autopilot engaged, you can always take the wheel. It might be a little stiff, but you just take it, make a quick turn, and then you'll see that shadow drive. So once it does that, you would have the helm, and then if you wanted to go back to the route or back to a heading hold, you can engage it from the autopilot display. But it's just more of a safety feature that Garmin puts in there. So at any time you can take the wheel. And again, the autopilot navigation, steering wheel, that does nothing for throttle. So you're still doing the throttle manually yourself.
Okay, perfect. And then I think just to let everyone know that's still on here, we're having a lot of calibration questions regarding the autopilot, which those will come in. We'll as we do our webinars coming up, we're keeping them down to about an hour, hour and a half, trying to shoot for 30 minutes, but that gets pretty tough to do. But we will, as we start getting through these, we'll do more advanced training and things, as Garmin, for calibrations on pilots, they really want that set up to a Garmin dealer, because you can change so many parameters and things around that they don't want you messing up. But we will go into some basic calibrations and things down the road. So
yeah, for sure. Just getting the foundation set.
Yep. And then let me look. Sam, are you able just to direct people again one more time to the links of our past webinars or videos? We get a lot of questions on fuel calibrations, which we've covered in media, or some of those things, or the past webinars.
Yeah, maybe I'll just send an email as soon as we're done with this, with the videos and the link to last week's webinar. And then once we get this week's webinar uploaded, I'll send another email later today.
But are they on the Tug Nuts website right now, or are they on our Ranger Tug website?
The fuel video and the updating video.
No, for our past webinar and the
No.
YouTube videos where people
Not yet. We're building a page on the website so they can be on there. If you go to YouTube and just Google Ranger Tugs Factory or Ranger Tugs as the prop turns,
Gotcha.
it's the first thing that comes up. And that's the last week's episode. And then if you go to the Ranger Tugs Factory channel there, then you can see Kenny's video, how to update the software on your Garmin. You see the fuel calibration video. And we'll have, hopefully by the time we do this next week, we'll have some pages on the website where you can find the past webinars. But for now, you just go to YouTube and search for them, and they'll pop up.
Also,
Tugs or and as the prop turns.
for last week's webinar, on the YouTube video, in the description, we have a link to the Dropbox folder that has that battery calculator that we used.
Okay.
And the PDF slides. So we'll have the all the relevant files in the description on YouTube.
Okay, perfect. And just as I'm learning this platform, as we end this, are we still able to answer the open questions here, Sam, or once we close the webinar, do they go away?
I think they go away once we close the webinar. I mean, they're in the log, but there's no way to stay on and answer them.
So this is now turned into questions for ourselves.
Yes.
All right, good. Nice work, Kenny.
Thanks, man.
Good job, Kenny. Thank
Appreciate it,
you.
Brian. Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice hanging out with you guys this morning.
Yep. We'll see everybody next week.
Yeah.
You guys.
I'll see you in
Bye,
about an
guys.
hour.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
See you later.
See ya.
Have a good
Thanks.
day.